here back in Lake County. I think we've got some of our folks who are going to graduate or in this class for the Florida State Guard, so I really appreciate everybody. So we're here at Camp Landing. We're joined by Florida State Guard Director Mark Thieme, Senator Clay Yarborough, Representatives Michael, Kendall, and Sapp, all from this area, as well as Lieutenant Colonel Randy Jones. And as I mentioned, we've got folks here from the Florida State Guard. We brought back the Florida State Guard kind of initially just out of necessity. We were in the midst of COVID. The Biden administration had come in and they imposed mRNA COVID shot mandates on service members, including the National Guard. Now, our policy was the opposite. We issued executive orders saying National Guardsmen do not have to take an mRNA COVID shot, and we ended up winning that. But at the time, we were looking at the fact that, at the end of the day, the federal government exercises administrative control over the Florida all the National Guards. And if push came to shove, we would fight the good fight. We knew there was a possibility that we could potentially lose that battle, and then you would have a lot of our National Guardsmen would be kicked out of the service. And we do know there were active duty military, Marines, soldiers, sailors, airmen who did get kicked out because they made the decision that they did not want to do the mRNA shot. It was a horrible policy. Obviously the policy's been rescinded. I think they're welcoming people back for that. It was not based in science. And the craziest thing about it was, if you had already had COVID, so this was kind of crystallized for us. But then you just had the fact that our National Guard gets mobilized and gets sent all over the world by the federal government. I don't send it. That's and they have the authority to do that. So we were concerned about that, especially just given how the Guard's been used so much on these overseas missions, that we wanted to make sure that we had the ability to control our own destiny. And so we had a Florida State Guard for many, many years. It had fallen out, it kind of went out of favor, not out of favor, but just it kind of expired sometime after World War II, and we knew that this could be something that could be meaningful. At a minimum, it'd be a place for our National Guardsmen, if push came to shove, and they actually did get removed because of the mRNA shot, they would be able to continue meaningfully serving the state of Florida. There was also something in a larger context, hey, this is no federal strings attached. This is something for our state to take care of our people and to conduct operations that are going to be important to Florida, such as disaster response. And these are folks that aren't going to get mobilized and sent halfway around the world by the federal government. They're folks that we're going to be in control of and be able to guide those missions to support the interests of the state of Florida. So we did that. And we were able to get things back. And there's already 23 states at the time that had state guards. If you remember at the time, there was an outcry from the left and from the media trying to claim that this was some type of a nefarious thing. They said it's going to be, the governor wants a personal mercenary force and all this other stuff. And I'm going to go through some of the accomplishments that we've had over these last 3 years. But that was a false narrative. Those were lies. And I don't think anybody, except people on the left and some of these legacy media outlets, would accept that today at all. And if you are, then you're just drinking the Kool-Aid that you should be smart enough to know is not worth anything. So this has been a real success story, and I'm proud of what's been done. So the first test, yet an inaugural class, training and equipping 120 soldiers, and then 2 months later, we had a major hurricane, Hurricane Idalia, that ripped through the Big Bend of Florida. So their first activation in 75 years, the State Guard deployed to 9 impacted counties in the northern part of Florida. They conducted damage assessments. They surveyed inland, coastal, and offshore waterways for public safety threats, survivors, overturned vessels, and infrastructure damage, and they provided more than 4,000 hot meals to impacted Floridians. So, Hurricane Idalia, that wasn't our first rodeo when it comes to hurricanes. We had Ian the year before, which is a Category 5. And so, we have muscle memory in Florida. We kind of have a good rhythm on this stuff. We take it very seriously. And I just remember, because I'm used to seeing Guthrie and his people, I'm used to seeing National Guard, I'm used to seeing FDOT, and there all these different agencies. And I started to see these state guardmen. I'm like, oh wow, that's awesome. We just started, and then they're already out there. And it was really, really significant. And so that was just the first class to be able to do. Our most recently completed round of entry training has increased the numbers to a total foresight of 630 Floridians who have answered the call to serve. There are more people that want to join the Florida State Guard than we have spots in training capacity to actually train them to be members of the Florida State Guard. And so I think that's something that's really significant. I also think it just shows that people have pride in the free state of Florida. We do things our own way here. We've seen a lot of other states, I think, go off really bad tangents. We've really held strong to do what's right, and the results have been very positive for the state of Florida. And I think people appreciate that. I think they want to be part of a great mission. So last year we appropriated, the legislature appropriated and I approved nearly $20 million and 32 full-time positions of the Florida State Guard as one of our as an effective statewide agency. This Guard continues to demonstrate that it has very strong value to the state of Florida. So 2024 was a busy year. The agency fortified our statewide emergency response and public safety system with their expanded land, air, and sea capabilities, a 425% personnel growth rate, and 5 additional construction projects across the state. The agency's aviation response quadrant equipped and trained 12 drone teams and received the first 3 of their 12 aircraft, increasing capability to support airborne damage assessments, maritime interdiction, medical evacuation assistance, disaster relief, and search and rescue operations. Their special missions unit deployed a new canine program in partnership with state and county law enforcement agencies to augment search and rescue capabilities, successfully conducting over 300 search and rescue missions this past hurricane season. The ground unit, the Crisis Response Battalion, advanced its route clearance and search and rescue capabilities through the addition of earth-moving equipment and state-of-the-art amphibious rescue vehicles. During 2024 season, the Crisis Response Battalion demonstrated the capability to independently establish and operate of distribution locations. Some of you may not know, you haven't had to go through these, but when there is a storm, you have power knocked out, you have things, we bring these points of distribution, water, rations, all these things, we get those up very, very quickly. You used to, most states, you wouldn't see that for like a week. We usually get it up within 48 to 72 hours, and really, you're not even supposed to do it before 72, but we get it in there. So that was really, really good. We've also had soldiers alongside Florida Highway Patrol more recently plowing snow when we had a snowstorm up in northwest Florida in January, and we saw the forecast on this, and it was an odd forecast because you literally had like a snowstorm across the Gulf states, and then north of that you didn't really have snow, so there were places that normally get it that weren't getting it. And I told my folks, Guthrie and these other guys, I said, listen, I was born and raised in Florida. When you go up to these northern climates and they have ice on the road, it's like the driving is different. And Florida driving isn't the best in the world. And so if we unleash Florida drivers on icy roads, you could have some really, really big problems. So we mobilized snow plows, we had salt, we did all that stuff. And I-10, the state roads, the bridges, and by and large, you had very, very minimal impacts. And we had a previous record was 4 inches of snow in Milton, Florida was the state record. Milton, Florida in January got 10 inches of snow in this snowstorm. There was more snow in Milton up to that point in January than there had been in Anchorage, Alaska over the similar period of time, which is just incredible. So that's something people will always remember, but our state, even though we're not really we don't really train for the snow, we're more focused on some of the other events that can happen response squadron expanded from 4 to 15 boat teams, improving their capabilities to support waterborne reconnaissance and disaster relief throughout rivers and inland waterways. And they received its first of 6 offshore vessels to support deep water, long-range maritime operations. Committing their soldiers and resources in service of the state, the Florida State Guard has deployed for 10 major activations across Florida, but also Texas and Western North Carolina. So here in Florida, our Operation Vigilant Sentry involves interdictions at sea as illegal aliens are trying to penetrate and land in Florida, mostly in southern Florida. They have worked with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement as tactical flight officers to identify and defend our coastal waters from activity. And you'll have illegals bringing drugs, you'll have illegals bringing firearms. Sometimes you just have a huge number of illegals that they want to turn loose in Florida. So interdiction. Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard's orders are to return them to their home country. Now with the Trump administration, you have even more manpower and it's even better relationship, which is really, really good. From April to June, we had National Guard soldiers deployed to the southern border as part of Operation Lone Star. We were the first state to send to help Texas back in 2021. We've consistently been engaged in that mission. We, of course, are not engaged in that mission anymore because the previous 4 years, the president's policy was to open the border, and the states were helping Texas to fight back against that. Now, President Trump's policy is to actually have the border secured, so they've reduced
send me a border legislation, because there was a border legislation that was proposed in Congress that said you can close the border once you reach 5,000 illegal border crossings a day. And I'm like, why would you want to codify into law that you're accepting 5,000 border crossings a day? It was a horrendous bill. It wouldn't have solved the problem. But basically, during the campaign, that was what Harris was saying. She says, well, you didn't do, if you guys hadn't killed the bill, we would have the border secured. Well, January 20th, there has not been any new legislation since then on securing the border. The president just did it. And so we now have a 94% reduction. So we are proud to have been participated in that mission when Texas really needed it. Confident in the federal government's posture on that. But there was a lot of great work done by Florida guardsmen, state guardsmen, when they were there. So this past hurricane season, over 600 members partnered with Division of Emergency Management, Fish and Wildlife, Department of Law Enforcement, Highway Patrol, National Guard. They conducted more than 300 search and rescue missions and 220 health and welfare checks. They were on the ground, Florida State Guard soldiers on the ground, 43 of Florida's 67 counties during hurricane season, and were making a remarkable difference. At my direction, following Hurricane Helene, the Florida State Guard was also deployed to Western North Carolina. I think those of you remember Helene, it did major storm surge really from southwest Florida all the way up to the Big Bend, and it was like 100 miles away from the coast, the west coast in southern parts, but the surge was still big, and so you had big problems there. It hits the Big Bend as a Category 4, and we had all our folks staged like what we do. We have the linemen stage. We had millions of power restored within the record time. We had search and rescue. We had all this stuff going on. So that happens as soon as the storm hits. Well, fortunately, even in a place like Taylor County, which was ground zero, you know, they had evacuated. There was not as many rescues as we feared. Now, there were some in other parts because of the water and how the surge, but all that stuff was taken care of. Things got stabilized relatively quickly. So then we're in a situation, I'm looking, and all hell's breaking loose in Western North Carolina. It was a terrible situation, which in and of itself is a problem, and we get help from other states. And so we always will respond. You know, people made a big deal because we sent help for California for something recently. And I'm like, that's not unusual with states. California has sent help to Florida in the past. So we wanted to help anyways, but Western North Carolina, so this was late September, so kind of past the summer season. But you go to Western North Carolina in the summer and you throw a dart anywhere on that map, you will hit someone from Florida. I mean, it's like Florida North, basically. So we've got a lot of our residents that spend time up there. Some of them have homes up there. And so I was concerned that some of them would be stranded, because you literally have communities that the bridges fell out, the roads washed away, and it was really, really difficult. So within record time on this, who shows up? Florida State Guard Special Missions Unit is showing up, getting people, and then bringing them to safety. And a lot of these people were very happy to see them, but honestly, they were surprised that they had wanted help, and the first people to show up are and I know that was something that was a big deal. So we had 2 different special mission units, search and rescue teams, 4 different counties in North Carolina, and they did it for basically a week. But then remember, we had Milton that came, so we kind of redeployed and we're ready for that. But that was really, really good operations there. They also helped up do things like set up temporary bridges. We had our FDOT there, all these other things. FEMA was really nowhere to be found, as you know, during that period of time. So I think that if you turn back the clock to a few years ago when we said we needed to stand this up, if you look at what's actually been accomplished, way more has been accomplished than I think even people like me thought was possible. And I was very gung-ho about the idea. So this is something that has been a great asset for the state. We have a lot of demand for really good people who want to join and be a part of it. We need to continue to meet that demand and welcome people who want to come for service to the state. If you look at what we pay for Florida Guard per day, what we pay for aircraft, all that stuff, on an hourly basis, we actually pay more when we use National Guard. The airtime costs more than when we use State Guard. Now, we obviously have some upfront costs standing everything up and whatnot, but this has been, I think, a very value-added thing for the state of Florida. All the things that people were saying years ago when we stood that up, those have been exposed as being bogus. That was a phony narrative, and anyone that's indulging in those narratives is, willingly doing the bidding of people with a political agenda. So I'm just glad that we've seen so much success. I'm so very thankful that people want to step up and serve in uniform on behalf of the state of Florida. The reality is we have to do these responses. We got to have a force that's capable and that's not going to be interfered with from the federal government. And yes, I don't foresee that happening under the current administration. But, administrations change. That's just what happens over the years. You see that. So we're protected against whatever may come down the pike 5, 10, 15 years from now by having a really strong state guard that serves Floridians and really puts it on the line to help their fellow Floridians. So thank you for what you've done. I'm excited to be serving as Commander-in-Chief of a capable force. And I look forward to continuing to see great things come out of our Florida State Guard. With that, I will bring up the Director of the Florida State Guard, Mark Thieme.
Good morning, Governor, Senator, representatives, soldiers, recruits, and future teammates. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us here today. It's pretty exciting to recognize and celebrate a significant development milestone for the Florida State Guard. As the governor mentioned just a moment ago, 630 is our current ranks. When we graduate this class here next week, we'll reach an 800 soldier threshold, along with the imminent receipt of aircraft and vessels, which the legislature has phenomenally resourced and approved. The Florida State Guard here this week and next will surpass the halfway mark to achieving our statutory requirements to support this state in emergency response and public safety. And we're well on our way, a very positive trajectory to reach full operational capability next fiscal year. Governor, leadership and vision starts at the top. Our being here today started with our governor 3 years that constituting the Florida State Guard is not just an imperative for today. The rapidly and ever-growing requirement for emergency response and public safety capabilities and capacity in our great state necessitates a guard. Our value is obvious. Follow the facts. Just this past year alone, we are in fast and we're out last. We are trained and equipped to persist in high-risk environments while all others are told to shelter in place. We cost substantially less to the Florida State taxpayer than any other state agency or the National Guard operating in this space. Less per man hour, less per flight hour. I am absolutely indebted to our legislature for following our governor's lead and establishing both our organizing principles and our governing structure in statute, which we are here today to show you and the rest of our state that we are faithfully and rapidly delivering. You, our legislature, have directed in state law that the Florida State Guard will protect and defend all citizens against our threats to public safety, and that we will augment all existing state and local agencies. We are doing that in spades, ladies. What you see behind here, in front of us, and out in the training fields is but a small representation of the air, maritime, and ground capabilities that are currently operational in the Florida State Guard, and who partner, train, and operate weekly with state and county emergency response and public safety agencies. Just in the past 60 days alone, we've been in and amongst 12 different counties, working, training, preparing. Colonel Attridge's Aviation Squadron provides aerial reconnaissance during disaster response. They carry county and state emergency response leadership to help them rapidly identify and then efficiently deliver critical care to point of need. They provide over water and over land search and rescue. They do hasty medical evacuations and maritime surveillance. Commander Jones's Maritime Squadron provides inland and offshore maritime security. They provide search and rescue. They support movement of disaster response teams, supplies, and hasty medevacs into and from isolated outer island communities. They support navigability assessments in our waterways before, during, and after major disasters. Colonel Murray's Crisis Response Battalion provides route reconnaissance, hasty and deliberate route clearance. This means that city and county emergency response teams have their lanes cleared as fast as we can so their first have very unique amphibious search and rescue capabilities so that communities that cut off, flooded, and isolated, we can get in and we can help them get out. They also have very, very credible emergency response team capabilities pulling from the vast repository of expertise the state has to offer. Colonel Bowen's Special Missions Unit augments the Florida Highway Patrol, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and Wildlife Commission, providing for public safety, providing particular emphasis, some very extraordinary capabilities hard to find, and we got them. That's paramedic, that's pararescue, that's canine search and rescue, and expeditionary FAA certified air traffic control teams. When you lose all power and you need to get those life flights in or out, we can do it. Few others can. Last year alone, these commanders and teams supported our communities during 10 activations. One data point, all those facts. During a 60-day stretch, 60 straight calendar days, we provided 375 days of emergency response concurrently with all of our state and local partners across 18 counties at the same time. It is also very important to note that every one of these commands is credited with multiple life-saving actions. If we had not been there, no one else was. Floridians would have perished. Let me leave you with a deeper understanding of who we are. We're not just the governor's Florida State Guard. These are not just my soldiers. We are fellow Florida citizens representing 59 of our counties. Our demographics are many, though concentrated in emergency medical, healthcare, first responder, and veteran populations. These are the very men and women whose first thought every day, and they are sworn under oath, is to protect, support, and serve someone else. It's a patient under their care. It's a city, a county, or a state's rule of law. It's our nation's Constitution. I couldn't be prouder to stand amongst them or with them in front of you. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to one of our commanders, Randy Jones. Do not need this. He's also the Chief of Staff for the Fort Myers Police Department. Thank you very much. Randy?
Thank you, sir. Governor DeSantis, I'm truly honored and humbled to have been asked to speak on behalf of the uniformed soldiers of the Florida State Guard. Less than 2 years ago, this organization was reestablished with the historic inaugural class of 120 volunteers. Today, we are over 800 strong, and next Tuesday, we will proudly graduate our 5th initial entry-level class. Under yours and Director Thieme's leadership, the Florida State Guard has branched into 4 distinct but unified commands. Today, the Florida State Guard is comprised of the Crisis Response Battalion, our largest contingent, the Maritime Squadron, Aviation Squadron, and Special Missions Unit. All 4 of these commands integrate seamlessly across our enterprise to ensure continuity of operations, a full-scope capability perspective that has returned major dividends for the citizens of Florida. I'd like to take a minute to highlight the accomplishments and impacts the Florida State Guard has made here at home and throughout the country in our 2 short years of existence. Hurricane Idalia, August 2023, our first historical deployment, as the governor mentioned earlier, in the Big Bend region of Florida. Operation Lone Star, January 2024 through May of 24 in Eagle Pass, Texas. The floods in Fort Lauderdale and Miami in 2024. Hurricane Debbie, Category 1, August 2024 in the Big Bend region. Hurricane Helene, Category 4, September 24, Big Bend region of Florida. Operation Blue Ridge, September of 2024, assistance to North Carolina. Hurricane Milton, Category 3, Southwest Florida. And the historic Gulf region snowstorm in 2025 in the I-10 corridor. Absolutely amazing that our state guardsmen would be moving snow on the I-10 region. In my home state of Maryland, I was used to doing this as a police officer all the time, standing on the highways, directing traffic, closing interstates. But for our state guard to be out there, absolutely amazing. During these missions, the Florida State Guard provided humanitarian aid, food, water, and shelter supplies. We worked alongside state and local emergency responders, performing more than 200 health and welfare checks, over 300 water rescues, 30 medical assists, over 50 pet rescues, and on 2 separate occasions rescued an infant in serious medical distress during Operation Blue Ridge and rescued a stranded kayaker that had been lost on the open waterways after Hurricane Helene in Steinhatchee. State Guard members additionally conducted over 500 damage assessments and assisted Florida Fish and Wildlife locating, clearing, and tagging over 50 derelict vessels following the 2024 hurricane season. With each mission, we reaffirm our commitment to excellence. The Florida State Guard has significantly expanded its training programs to ensure our soldiers are fully prepared for any challenge, man-made or natural disaster. Training evolutions include heavy equipment operations, large vehicle trailering, maritime and aviation schools and qualifications, search and rescue training, special communications training, and special missions tactical training all continue on a regular and ongoing basis and come together with an all-command integrated annual training exercise. The backbone of any organization is its people. The men and women of the Florida State Guard are an amazing group of individuals with a wealth of education, knowledge, and experience. Their backgrounds in education range from doctors, lawyers, law enforcement officers, firefighters, EMTs, all branches of the military, and yes, even a registered alligator trapper. Our soldiers are truly our greatest asset. Behind every soldier stands a network of unwavering support. I would like to personally thank our soldiers' families and loved ones for their continued support and for allowing them to leave and serve their fellow Floridians during their own time of personal need. I would also like to thank our soldiers' employers for their continued support, for without their compensation and understanding, their compassion and understanding, our soldiers would not have the financial ability to maintain their high level of commitment to the Florida State Guard. And I would be remiss if I did not personally thank the great city of Fort Myers, my Chief of Police, Jason Fields, Mayor Kevin Anderson, my city manager, and my city council. For without them, I could not commit the time and effort to support this great organization. Governor, I want to personally thank you for your steadfast commitment for making Florida the gold. Unequivocally say, Florida is an amazing state to work in. Having retired from Maryland after 30 years in law enforcement and moving to Florida, I proudly recruited many of my colleagues to build a second career here in Florida. And they often ask me, why Florida? It's so hot in Florida. Maryland's got beaches, Maryland has mountains. And I answer them always with one thing. Maryland is a great state to be from, but in Florida, people always use all 5 fingers when they wave at the cops. The Florida State Guard is not just an organization, it's a legacy in the making. It's a force built on selflessness and dedication of its volunteers. As I stand here today, I'm especially proud that my own son is among the trainees set to graduate in this initial entry-level class next week, joining many multi-generational families serving the people of Florida. There's a famous quote that I think epitomizes the Florida State Guard soldiers. There's nothing stronger than the heart of a volunteer. God bless you all, and God bless the Florida State Guard.
Okay.
Thank you. Good morning. Governor DeSantis, thank you for the opportunity to join you today, and thank you for your leadership and hard work to protect the people of Florida. As the governor has made clear, the Florida State Guard is a vital force for enhancing the state's preparedness and response to emergencies. The existence of the Guard ensures that Florida can better manage natural disasters, public health crises, and other state-specific challenges, while at the same time offering necessary assistance to other states, like what has been done to help Texas at our southern border. The presence of the Guard also strengthens the state's resilience and ability to protect Floridians, maintain public order, and aid our local communities. Supporting the Florida State Guard means investing in the safety and security of the entire state, which our constituents certainly deserve. As a member of the legislature, I would like to offer a sincere thank you to the men and women of the Florida State Guard and to their families, as it's been mentioned, and also to Executive Director Mark Thieme. Thank you very much for your leadership. I was honored to be able to cast a vote in favor of the proposal a few years ago from the governor to reactivate the Guard, and look forward to continuing to support our Florida State Guard in the coming year's budget. And again, on behalf of the members of the legislature who are here today, we thank you for your service. Thank you so much for what you do each day. God bless you. Governor, again, thank you very much.
Okay. Good job. And you know, Colonel, we also have much lower taxes than Maryland. I can tell you that, and we'll keep it that way. So, I really appreciate Clay and the other legislators who stepped up to the plate years ago to be able to reconstitute that. I think they understood the vision. I think they understood why this was important for the state. They were able to cut through the noise. And ultimately, we've proved all the critics wrong. And this is something that has been really meaningful for the state and also gives our citizens an opportunity to have meaningful service to a place that they really care about. So my hat's off to everyone that's been involved in this, and let's just keep it going. Yes, sir. Oh, I think there's a lot of possibilities. This is, but I also think, though, is that Donald Trump has been in office for like 5 weeks. Why aren't we working to make sure that his vision and the mandate is delivered for the people that voted for him, including the people of Florida? That's what we've done in Florida. Now, we obviously have our priorities that we have to do just generally, but if you look at what we've done to support the immigration mission, no other state has even come close to doing what Florida has done to put itself in the fight. We're assisting. We are going to help enforce the law. We are going to help with the removal of illegal aliens. And yesterday I was able to announce all 67 counties. Not all counties are like Clay County in terms of how they view some of this stuff, but all 67 counties with their sheriffs have signed what is called 287G agreements, which is not just turning them over if they're in the jail, not just abiding by a detainer, but street-level enforcement through a task force model. That's something that's really, really significant. So I think that's got to be the focus, and I know these guys in Congress do. I just, you know, you hear like they pass this budget resolution, and then people saying, oh, this is tax cuts, this all this. And I actually read it, didn't say anything about that. What it did say was that currently our national debt's $36 trillion. By 2034, off this was written in what they voted on, the debt goes up to $55 trillion in like 10 years. And I think the government under that current framework is spending $5.4 trillion in the current upcoming years. The forecast for top line, I don't think that includes all the entitlements or Social Security at least, but then that's going to go up to $7.5 trillion by 2034. And I was like, wait a minute, I thought we were reducing spending. In Florida, less than what was spent in the previous fiscal year. That's how you be responsible. So you have so much time between now and heck, the filing is what, in 16 months, and the primaries after that, and then a general election. So I think people really should be focusing on getting the job done that they were elected to do. That's what we're doing in Florida. And we were down there with all the sheriffs, and we were down there with DHS yesterday. Had we just said, oh, you know, we're supporting the Trump administration, go get them, guys, and we didn't actually take any action, I mean, we probably could have gotten away with that and just said, oh, yeah, we're on board, we're on board. I mean, that's what most people in elected office do. They talk, but they don't actually act. And we decided we're not going to just sit on our hands. I was asked yesterday, are you saying Florida's not a sanctuary state? Yeah, I've been saying that a long time. Of course we're not a sanctuary state. We banned sanctuary cities my first year as governor, but that's not enough. You have an affirmative obligation to be in this battle so we can solve this issue once and for all. So I'm proud of my friends here in the legislature for stepping up and answering the call. I know there were some differences about whether we needed to do it early, and I think everyone now is glad that we got the strongest legislation in the country passed, signed, and then executed in record time. Our state agencies have the agreements with ICE. Now the sheriffs. Now we're working with the police, the police departments. Yeah, but there's over like 400 in Florida. So they're working through how you do those agreements, but there's no state that's even come close to what we're doing. You also look at what we're doing, my announcement this week about the doging of Florida. Now, as I said, we're spending less this year than we did last year. Since I became governor, if you look at all the state's debt from the founding of Florida to the present, we've retired 41% of that and are on track to do even more, and we're proud of that. And the legislature has helped with the accelerated payment schedule, which saves us a lot of money on interest and puts the state in. So we have the lowest per capita debt of all 50 states. We obviously have one of the lowest state tax burdens, and we have eliminated boards and commissions and regulation. We're proposing to eliminate another 70 boards, but as part of and we want to doge local government. We're going to ask the legislature to do some legislation so we can send doge teams into some of these local governments. It's interesting, since we've had that announcement, there have been a handful of places that said they may want to volunteer to do doge in their county, because I think these are people that got elected in recent years, but they saw a lot of profligate spending over the years, and they want to come in and help reorder the decks. And if you look at these local government budgets, they've exploded. last five or 6 years. Absolutely exploded. Because what they do is they'll assess you buy your house for $300,000 7 years ago. Now all of a sudden they're telling you it's worth $900,000, and then they tax you more for that. That is not good policy. We're going to work on relief on that too for people's property taxes, because I think it's ridiculous that it's one thing to tax you on a transaction, but to just keep assessing your property like that, and you don't know how much a property's worth until there's a transaction that's made. You can say it's worth this, but until someone's willing to pay you that much and you agree to it, then you can't do it. But that's what's happened, and they've got a gusher of revenue, but then they basically grown. So that's really important. But a part of the DOGE, which I think is interesting, we rejected hundreds of millions of dollars from the Biden infrastructure program because as a condition of receiving and using that funds, they wanted us to impose change our behavior to try to act the way they wanted to act, and we were the only state in the country to say no. We're not going to accept it. We got a big surplus. We just did Moving Florida Forward a couple years ago, plowed billions of extra dollars. We're accelerating projects. I was in I-75 near Ocala. Those of you in Northeast Florida probably don't have to travel that route very much, because if you go, you use other interstates. But you could be in standstill traffic between the villages and Ocala at almost any time it can happen. So we're doing the widening 15 years ahead of schedule. So we're proud of that. But of all that, we tried to send the money back to Biden. We're like, here, we're not doing it. They responded, we have no mechanism to accept your money. And I'm thinking to myself, does that just not show you how inept this federal government has become? I'm confident with Musk that money back, and I'm happy to do others, but we're not going to, my view on this stuff is like, we pay a lot of income taxes in Florida. People sometimes act like that we get so much more, and they include Social Security benefits. That's not the state getting that. Those are people that paid into Social Security. We have a lot of retirees, so if you count everyone that gets a Social Security check, oh, Florida is not getting that money. That's individuals that are getting that money. If those seniors move to Georgia, they get their check in Georgia. If they move to Texas, it has nothing to do with the state government. So that whole thing is just a canard that they do. But, look, we pay taxes. If there's different things, I pull whatever lever I can to try to help folks, but we are not going to let them change our behavior, and we are happy to send that money back to DOGE and to the federal government. So we're on board. We're making Well, we would not, I can tell you this. Well, first of all, as a philosophical matter, you work hard, you purchase land, purchase a home, maybe you have a mortgage, you pay off your mortgage, and it's like, at what point are you free and clear? And what property tax says is that you never really own your property because you got to pay rent to the government. And I just think that you have senior citizens that are on fixed incomes, and their home is now they're being told their home that they bought for $200,000 30 years ago is now worth $1.3 million, and they got to pony up and pay more taxes. And the homestead exemption is too weak to protect people. So that's a problem. Philosophically, it's a problem, but then operationally, people are getting pinched from these property taxes. Obviously, everything's gone up over the last 4.5 years. We've seen the worst inflation this country's had in many, many decades. Unfortunately, it hasn't abated. You see it in some things that are kind of one-off occurrences, like with the eggs and stuff, but you have seen an acceleration of inflation at the tail end of the Biden administration. So that's not good, and hopefully they'll be able to do some things like reducing spending to get it back under control. But so everything's gone up, groceries, all the stuff, and these taxes are really pinching people. So I think people need relief from that. Now, what I also said is, how do you do that? How do you go? That's why we want people to have a discussion about it. That's why this would be something that would be on the ballot in 26. So you to work with people. But I will tell you this, that, and I think that's one of the reasons we want to do the DOGE on local governments. There is a huge problem with growth of local governments throughout Florida. That's just a fact. And so let's get in there and let's look at this. Let's be transparent about it. And I think taxpayers will be able to identify ways that they can spend less. I mean, I saw some figures from one of the, I think it was Broward in South Florida. Like the last 5 years, their budget's grown 82%. And they've had no increase on net in population. So how does that happen? Now, we have had inflation, and there's some certain things, but that's a big increase. So we're going to approach this very thoughtfully, but the reason why we want to do this is to give people relief. So when they put out stuff saying, oh, somebody, they can't attribute it to me because I've never said it, although that doesn't stop them. You know, it's funny because we're getting ready to do the legislative session. I know these guys are still filing legislation. What the media likes to do, they like to find some bill that they can demagogue or claim is crazy, and they'll say, Florida files, and then they'll have my picture on the article. And it's like, well, wait, what do I have to do? Did I file it? No. Did I know about it? No. Did I endorse it? No. And they will do that just to try to generate more clicks, because if they put my picture, they can get more clicks than if they just told what the truth is. So, so you're going to see that. But the reality is this is something that's really biting. I can tell you there's no appetite to do things at the state level that is going to increase any of our state taxes. In fact, one of the things we're trying to do, we've done a lot of tax cuts, but we are actually looking to eliminate the tax on business rent, which is harder for smaller businesses, you know, when they're having to absorb those costs. We're the only state in the country that does that. We've reduced it significantly. We have a chance to sunset, abolishing an entire tax. That's a good thing. And we have plenty of revenue in the state of Florida, and actually probably won't lose very much from this because I think it probably inhibits businesses. So this is all to protect taxpayers. At the same time, no governor in the history of, certainly in modern Florida, has devoted more resources to education than I have. That's just a fact. We've done billions of dollars in increases for teacher salaries starting 5 years ago. We did bonuses my first year, then we did the teacher categorical. Because, you know, you can increase spending for education, it can go to bureaucracy. So we created a provision in the budget, you gotta spend on teacher. So this most recent year, we have $1.25 billion that can only be used for teacher pay, and I propose that we increase that coming forward this year. And so we understand it's significant. We also have robust school choice. There's a lot of things that are in flux in terms of parents now being really empowered, and they're making decisions that are the best for their kids. But that's always going to be a priority for us. We've also done a lot on higher education. One of the things we're looking to do on DOGE is to DOGE our public universities. If you look at the budget since I've been governor, they've gone up a lot. In fact, someone showed me the actual numbers. I had a little sticker shock. I was like, I approve that much increase? I was like, we did, right? And we're proud of the mission. And we're proud that we have, I think, what do we have, 4 universities ranked in the top 50 for public in the country. And we're continuing to do more. And no tuition increases in Florida. Imagine that. Where else in the United States can you get a high-quality college education for $6,300 a year in tuition? I can answer that for you. No other place in the country. We have the lowest tuition by probably pretty far, but then when you count for quality, it's not even close. But we want to DOGE the universities because I think that providing that money, I think it's done a lot of good, but I also want to know how much administrative bloat is there. When we were the first state to abolish DE&I, they shuttered these offices. But then what happened to those employees? Are they burrowed in other parts of the university where they're continuing to do that by another name? That's why you do DOGE teams, to be able to do that. So I think this is a great opportunity. Number one, people need relief. We got to provide relief. So I'm going to work with the legislature. I'm going to work with folks throughout the state over the next months and year to be able to have something that's really, really significant and bold. But you can't just say that spending for government is on autopilot and you can never reevaluate what levels are being spent. Because any budget I've looked at, Yeah, there's things that everyone agrees on, but there's also things that they don't agree on and that are not necessarily mission critical. So they have done a 287G agreement with ICE, and I think it's good, and I think they will play a role, but I also know that just functionally, the state agencies that are going to play the biggest role are going to be the Highway Patrol, because they're going to be interacting with illegal aliens more than anybody else. And that's the thing. In Florida, now they got to go through training, they got to do some of this stuff to be able to exercise these immigration functions. But when our highway, and so once these guys are trained up and then they can exercise this authority, they pull somebody over driving under the influence, persons here illegally, I don't think you just release them back into our community. I think you bring them over to ICE. And I think the process goes forward in terms of the ICE. And we're going to be doing that. That's going to be as a matter of course in Florida. I think that's going to be pretty significant when you look at the different interactions. I also think Florida Department of Law Enforcement is going to have significant interactions. And so you're just looking, the state guard's a smaller footprint. They're not necessarily out doing civilian type functions. It's more crisis response. Clearly, they can play a role on our maritime operations, and there may be some other operations where they can be helpful in. And so I think they'll play a role, but I think the main role is going to be Highway Patrol, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and then also when you're talking about maritime, Florida Fish and Wildlife, they've been very much involved with Operation Vigilant Sentry, and I think there's going to be other opportunities for them to do that going forward. But it just shows you, though, the fact that the State Guard can also assist in this, how versatile they really are. I mean, they can show up and create a point of distribution and deliver food and water. They can do maritime rescues. People get stuck in these hurricanes and the water's high. They can go in and get them out. They can do air operations where they're going into like Western North Carolina, where the roads, the bridges were built out, and they're going and they're landing there. And that's pretty remarkable. And for only being really 3 years old is really, really significant. So I think they have a large portfolio, and I wouldn't want people to think that somehow the immigration mission is going to be their top, because I think the disaster response and some of the crisis operations are probably going to be number one for them. We have no involvement in that. I read about it through the media. Clearly, the federal government has jurisdiction, whether they want to rebuff his entry into the United States, and I have confidence that whether it's Pam Bondi or Kristi Noem, that they will be looking at that. I do know our Attorney General state hooks and jurisdiction we may have to be able to deal with this. But the reality is no, Florida is not a place where you're welcome with that type of conduct in the air. And I don't know how it came to this. We were not involved. We were not notified. I found out through the media that this was something that was happening. Okay, guys, thanks so much. God bless everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you.